Should Australians be prepared for having their faces scanned to use social media?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Tonight's guest is really someone that needs no introduction. He's a much loved and respected figure and leader in the freedom movement. Morgan C. Jonas, how are you, mate?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, Leon, and thanks for having me on.
Nice to have you on, as always. Morgan, I want to play a recent announcement from the Premier. This was in response to the Northland Machete incident, and I want to get your response and reaction to what our dear leader said in this announcement.
I want to be absolutely clear that here in the state of Victoria, community safety comes first. And we have seen over the weekend 2 incidences in both South Melbourne and at Northland Shopping Centre that were appalling, which is why I'm announcing today we'll be bringing in place a ban on the sale of machetes here in Victoria, and this ban will be in place from midday on Wednesday. It's a total ban on all sales everywhere right across Victoria. And we're doing this today as quickly as possible because we must never let the places where we gather, the places where families come together to meet, to shop, to enjoy the peace of their weekend become the places we fear. We've introduced Australia's toughest bail laws. We're introducing tougher knife crime powers. We've extended those search powers as well. And now we are choking the supply of machetes by bringing about this immediate ban from them being sold anywhere in Victoria, because I'm continuing to be focused on keeping Victorians safe.
What do you make of that, Morgan?
Well, the people who will suffer the most as a result of this ban, Leon, are the retailers who have purchased large amounts of inventory, machete retailers, hunting stores, even Bunnings. So this move carries a complete disregard for these businesses and their merchandise that they have in stock that they have outlaid thousands, more than that for this stock. But furthermore to that point, Leon, this ban is nothing more than political theatrics, and it seeks to create the impression that the government is taking action on machete crime. But the fact of the matter is that law-abiding citizens who own machetes are never going to be committing crime. And criminals who commit violent crime, whether it be with a machete, a baseball bat, or anything else, will always find a way to acquire a weapon to carry out their violent crime. And what we learned from the John Howard era National Firearms Agreement was that if a would-be killer was unable to get their hands on one weapon, say it be a firearm, they would simply substitute that weapon for something else. So if a would-be machete-wielding assailant is unable to get his hands on a machete, he'll simply use a kitchen knife or a makeshift machete or a steel pole or a screwdriver or a chainsaw or something else. So the fact of the matter is that the machete ban achieves nothing more than political theatrics, creating the impression that the government is taking action. But in reality, Leon, you and I would probably both agree that the fundamental root cause of all of this violence is many, many, many layers deeper than a neutral tool, in this case, machetes.
I want to just quickly show something here. This is from Mark Rowley. So after Victoria banned literally anything that can be used as a weapon, Jacinta Allen's African gangs raided adult stores and are now clubbing each other with giant dildos. So just a little shout out from Mark Rowley, some British humour from a Pommy. But on a serious note, what do you think is a deeper root cause? So if machete bans are not a silver bullet, magic silver bullet to solving this issue, what do you think might be? I know this might be a difficult question to answer because it's a complex issue, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say the cause is very multifaceted. So there's so many different angles that we can take here. So I'll just mention some key points, and maybe the audience at home can discuss these points, with their friends and family around the dinner table. Now, let's see. Point number one is we obviously have a very weak bail system where you have these youth offenders getting arrested and bailed sometimes dozens of times within a 12-month period, thus sending the green light that committing violent crime is okay because they're getting away with it unpunished. So there's our weak bail laws. We have inadequate juvenile detention and prison space. So our government has not invested adequately in correctional facilities, and there's simply just not enough beds to house all of these offenders. Furthermore, we cannot ignore the social cohesion implications of certain immigration policies that we have in place at the moment. Leon, it is a fact that when a country engages in large-scale immigration from countries that have experienced significant amounts of war or terrorism or civil unrest, it only is a logical conclusion that aspects of the antisocial violent behavior that permeates throughout such societies will inevitably make its way over to the country of which is, of course, engaging in the importation of such peoples. And to ignore this glaringly obvious reality is to ignore the root cause, and ignoring the root cause whilst focusing on surface level fake solutions like banning certain tools is never going to solve the problem. So and there is also the aspect of social inequality, lower socioeconomic areas with fatherless homes. So for people at home, when I speak about immigration, don't think in a blanket manner I'm just throwing, say, Sudanese or another culture under the bus. It's also important to point out that in a lot of these immigrant families, you've got the father who comes to Australia, who leaves home early in the morning, works all day, comes home late at night, and during that time, the sons are just running around, acting like thugs. So whilst it's easy, in one regard to point the finger, we also have to, look at the home environment of these people. In saying that, it is not an excuse. And my opinion has always been that any offenders, youth or otherwise, need to be locked away for a very, very long time. We need to significantly ramp up deportations of violent offending non-citizens, and we need to start sending a very significant message, whether it's to a migrant community or Australian-born community, that violent crime will be met with severe consequences, because right now that message is absent within our society.
I think there's something unique, and some people would say, "Oh, well, you know, people for bringing this up, people are racist," but it's not. It's got nothing to do with race. It's a cultural issue, because if you look at people, immigrants from, say, Kenya, Zimbabwe, they are the ones that I've met. They're all very educated, they're well-to-do, they're law-abiding, very respectable people. They don't cause any problems here. So it's got nothing to do with race. Race is irrelevant. It's a cultural issue. And Sudan, as you pointed out, is a war-torn country. It's got one of the most extreme conflicts in the world, where they have child soldiers. So a lot of these kids or teenagers, or these young guys in their 20s and even 30s who are carrying out these violent offenses, I'm assuming a lot of them have a history with the war, and they're desensitized with violence. So you mentioned deportations, but we also have people that are citizens from countries like Sudan that have lived here, have had citizenship for 5, 10 years, maybe even longer. What do we do with you know, people in that category that are committing extreme violent crimes and are clearly not assimilating into the culture and not following the laws?
That's a very good question, Leon. I personally think that our country needs a much longer probationary period before granting citizenship in general. So, as it's given that many of these people are indeed citizens, based on our laws, they must be treated as citizens and punished accordingly. I would argue that we have a legal system that has become soft over the years, and magistrates and judges have made decisions based on cultural relativism and taking into account one's potential past trauma, which I say is irrelevant to the victim who got stabbed, for example. So I would like to see a new immigration process that focuses on a much longer probationary period. And call me radical, Leon, but I would also be in favor of, and this will probably never happen, some type of retroactive changes to our immigration legislation to you know, potentially allow for rescinding citizenship if it's only been a few years and a certain individual turns out to be a violent menace. I believe that we should have reserve the right to say, hey, all right, you came here for an opportunity. You have not just bitten the hand that chewed you, but stabbed or killed these people or invaded their homes. Back you go. And I would support changes to our laws like that.
I mean, anyone who pulls out a machete in an argument to resolve a dispute, that's their go-to. It simply shouldn't be allowed in the country at all. They should be automatically deported. I would say, I mean, I would argue that your view is not extreme. It's based on common sense, and common sense is not so common. What I would say is extreme and radical is letting in hundreds of thousands of immigrants in a space of 6 months, 6 to 12 months, in a country where there's no infrastructure to accommodate that amount of people. Immigration is good. I mean, I'm an immigrant. It served this country well, but not in this. There's got to be a way to do it properly, and this is not the way. Not where we've got a situation where clearly the country is not coping with that level of immigration. So I think anyone that supports that, the current Labor government that's supporting that policy along with the Greens, they are the radicals, they are the extremists. What do you think they're trying to achieve by bringing in this number of people where the country is clearly not able to cope with that volume of immigration?
I believe they're trying to secure future elections, Leon, I think these people, these people in the Labor Party who are greatly responsible for such policies, only have interest in maintaining their positions of power in this country. And they know for a fact the more immigrants that come in under their policies, regardless of whether those policies are socially responsible or not, they will be voting Labor. So politics is a numbers game, and what the Australian public can be very confident in is that when such decisions are made, they are made not in the interest of the general public, but in the interest of securing political positions for a select few within our society. And this is indicative of the selfish, self-serving political state of affairs in this country, and yet again a stark reminder of our desperate need for political change before it's too late.
Do you think there's and that's a very logical motive for them doing it, because seemingly what they're doing seems illogical, but what you've mentioned makes a lot of sense. Do you think there are other motives as well? Do you think that there is a motive probably pushed by corporate lobby groups to bring in immigrants from developing nations who they can exploit? They can pay them a quarter of what they pay the Australian worker, and these immigrants, culturally speaking, are servile to authority. They're less likely to question authority, and they work a lot harder. They work longer hours. Do you think that that also might be a motive?
There can be absolutely no doubt, Leon. The various business lobbies in this country have a vested interest in large amounts of immigration, particularly from developing countries. So I'll echo your sentiments there. You look at who are the benefactors of such policies. Well, as I mentioned, the political ruling class, but also certain corporations that can capitalize off cheap labor at the expense of the general population, resulting in the stagnation of wages, and various other corporations whose profits depend on consumerism, consumable products that need to be purchased over and over again. They are also big winners from this vast, socially irresponsible immigration agenda.
And speaking of political motives and bringing in people so they can continue to vote for the Labor Party and the Greens, this is a nice segue to the election, which was really a train wreck and disaster. So in retrospect, what do you think went wrong when we're inspecting this train wreck?
I think I have an interesting position because I contested a state election in 2022, leading a party where there were several other parties in the field, and the dynamics are not straightforward, to say the least. We saw infighting between parties who should naturally be allies, and the infighting that permeated resulted in the fragmentation of preference allocation, and thus we see the disastrous result. Warren from One Nation, a fine candidate, somebody I respect, losing to Labor for the final Senate seat. That never should have happened. We saw, of course, Jackie Lambie, and we can never forget the violent manner in which she berated and threatened those who did not want the vaccine. We saw her
Unhinged.
defeating Lee Hansen, who I'm sure would have made a perfectly good, fine senator for Tasmania. We saw, of course, yet again, the emergence of Clive Palmer with his new party, the Trumpet of Patriots, neglecting to include One Nation in his preference how to vote cards for the Senate, and the effect of which that had in certain states. I'm not too sure. I have not yet analysed the line by line count for the Senate, and we had other instances, Queensland infighting. So what this proves to me is that unless the minor right, can somehow organise themselves, we'll just keep seeing Labor victory upon Labor victory.
What do you think it would take to bring the right together, to unite them?
It takes willingness. So being a registered officer of a party here in Victoria, Freedom Party, I'm like, hey, I am all for the negotiations. So anyone else from any other parties, know that I am a willing participant. What it takes is a commitment to the country and to the cause. What it takes, Leon, is for other candidates, party presidents, and party agents to prioritize the betterment of society over their own personal ambitions of strolling down the halls of some parliament. Because for the public and for society, who cares about one guy sitting in one seat? We need results. And if there's going to be greed and parties on the right swapping parties with the left before other friendly parties on the right, then I will put out right now, they are the enemy of this country. They are the people holding our nation back from advancing and achieving the means so eloquently put in our national anthem. So so the short answer is cooperation, putting our nation first, and putting people's personal ambitions, not even in second place, but like down the chain.
There was an argument because there were so-called freedom parties, minor parties on the right, that said that they want to destroy the uni-party system. There's no difference between Labor and Liberal. Dutton's really just a Labor stooge. What do you make of that argument?
I personally don't support it, Leon. So for all intents and purposes, I see Labor and the Greens as redundant and completely useless. And when I look at the Liberals and the Nationals, yes, there are many useless people in these parties, and some of them have very powerful positions in their respective administrative committees. But there's also good people in these parties and people who are passionate about reforming those parties. Matt Canavan, I believe, is a fine senator for the Nationals. And there's several Liberals as well who are fantastic, such as Alex Antic, who is achieving in tremendous strides reformation in South Australia. So whether the general public wants to accept it or not, and don't shoot me because I'm just conveying the facts here to anyone listening at home. The Liberal Nationals hold a certain primary vote that will exist election in, election out. It's not going to be destroyed anytime soon. So who do you want occupying that primary vote? Good intended people who have a bone for freedom, such as Alex Antic or say Moira Deeming here in Victoria, or those from the radical left faction of the Liberal Party. So we want to see an empowered Liberal Party that goes back to its original roots, its original principles, its founding we believe statement, which is largely based on personal liberty, and that party should be cooperating with parties on the minor right. So that is the dynamic that, in my very firm view, must exist for Australia to move forward. And people will agree and say, no, you got to burn it to the ground. That's just unrealistic, and it's not going to happen anytime soon. And Australia is not a revolutionary country. There's not going to be a storming of the parliament and seizing power. we're not living in Burma or somewhere like that. So yeah, I hope I answered your question with that, Leon.
Absolutely. And look, I ran for state politics under Clive Palmer, and I'm very grateful for Clive for giving me that opportunity to do that. And I have a lot of respect for him. But during the election, some of the things that the Trumpets of Patriots did, how they preferenced, Labor ahead of Liberal candidates, and even the Teals, it just left me scratching my head. I just simply didn't understand the strategy behind what they were doing, and they even, preferenced Labor ahead of Peter Dutton in his own seat, and he ended up losing his seat, which was very unfortunate. But one of the arguments that people on the right make is they try to, it's not an argument, they try to emulate Donald Trump in the US. But ironically, Donald Trump didn't undermine the mainstream right-wing party, the Republican Party. He joined and he took over that party, which I find incredibly ironic, because that's the exact opposite. They're doing the exact opposite of what Donald Trump is doing, essentially. Tell me, just slightly different topic with Moira Deeming. You mentioned Moira Deeming before. What's your reaction to the recent win that she had against John Pizzuto, where I think he's going to be out of politics shortly?
My reaction is one of, how do I put this, Leon? What's the right word? It's a very satisfying outcome. John Pizzuto demonstrated an extraordinary level of arrogance. And not only that, the man was a bully. He threw his junior female colleague under the bus, trashed her to the media, lied about her. He was the leader of the party. He should have had her back, as any real leader would do. He referenced fake articles on the internet to try and implicate her and to dirty her good name. She gave him the opportunity to make it all go away with a simple apology. But John, being the pig-headed man that he is, couldn't bring himself to swallow his pride. So instead of turning the car around, he said, no, I'm going the right direction. And he drove his car off the cliff. He's made his own bed. He needs to live with it. He's in the hole a few $1 million now. And the only person John Pizzuto has to blame for this is John Pizzuto. Justice has been served. He acted disgracefully, and the right outcome has been presented by the court. So, yeah, victory.
It sounds like, I don't know if you watched his appearance on Four Corners along with Dave Sharma. It sounds like he hasn't done any introspection. He has no remorse over what he did. At least Four Corners tried to portray him as a victim of free speech. So he's now a free speech martyr. What's your reaction to that?
There's a very big difference between free speech and blatant defamation. And, Four Corners can say whatever they want to say. The general public can make up their own mind about his words. But more importantly, the federal court made up its mind. And that's the decision that matters, not a fake narrative on Four Corners. And in regards to the lack of introspection, well, that's just indicative of a weak human being who refuses to learn, who refuses to grow, and who does not possess the moral fortitude to put his hand up and to say that he was wrong. It's pathetic.
It sounds like the character traits of a narcissist.
Big time.
And tell me, just going back to federal politics now that the Labor government has been re-elected, will we see Albanese try to repackage and reintroduce The Voice
It's hard to say, Leon. I believe it was Senator Penny Wong who alluded to bringing back the voice, and then Anthony Albanese pulled rank on her publicly and walked back her statements. So they said yes, they said no. Who knows? If you were to ask me, do I trust the Anthony Albanese government? My answer would be a resounding no. Will they bring back the voice? Maybe in one way, shape, or form. Maybe instead of a referendum leading to the amendment of our constitution, there will be a bill put up that legislates some type of council or tribunal to be incorporated into some sort of parliamentary process. We already have that in Victoria. For people who don't know at home, we have an Indigenous advisory board in our Victorian government, which is pretty much what the voice was. So I don't have a crystal ball. I couldn't tell you, but if you're watching at home, I'd say, yeah, probably. I mean, what does the Labor government do? And too often Liberal chases this model. They spend money. They spend money that doesn't belong to them on causes that are designed to keep them in power. So I'd say there's a good chance that they'll do something.
Going back to state politics, November 2026. What are the plans for November 2026? Can you tell our audience? What are your plans?
Well, Freedom Party is registered and cleared to run. So a lot of people said, Morgan and Freedom Party, they'll be done after the election. They'll disappear. They won't pass their compliance. Well, no, we've passed our compliance year in, year out. Freedom Party is here and will be on the ballot paper for 2026 November. Will I be running myself? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not too sure. I am quite busy with some other, work matters in my life. I may just coach candidates and hopefully see some of my members elected. Maybe I'll run myself. I haven't decided. But what I'm hoping for is that the like-minded parties cooperate in productive manners of which we have never seen before for the shared objective of achieving an outcome to the likes of which we've never seen before. The numbers are there. The mathematics checks out. We need the parties to come to the table.
What do you think about the state of the Liberals now with the new opposition leader?
The federal Liberals or
the state Liberals? Brad Batten, what do you think? Have they got a good fighting chance?
I think that Brad Batten is a decent human being and he's shown a lot of competence in his capacity as leader. I was on a panel with Brad Batten back in 2022, somewhere in Southeast Metro. He presents well, he speaks well, so I don't have anything bad to say about the guy. I think that he's a worthy leader of the opposition, unlike John Pesutto, where I obviously have a lot to say about John Pesutto. In fact, Leon, if you don't stop me, I could probably talk all night about my grievances with that guy, who and he even tried to he was even involved in trying to sort of derail something I was doing, an event. But anyway, that's another story.
Oh, wow.
To answer your,
I'd love to hear that story, but it's up to you whether or not you want to tell. I'll leave that to you, but I'd really be keen to hear it.
I can, yeah. Well, let's park that one for now.
Suspense.
What I was going to say was, I think that people should give Brad Batten a chance. Is he a Victorian version of Donald Trump? No. Can he do a better job than John Pesutto? Yes, that's not saying much, but I think that Victorians should give him a go.
How does he compare to Peter Dutton? Is he more conservative than Peter Dutton?
That's a good question. I mean, I believe that he's from the conservative side of the Liberal Party, Brad Batten. I think that's yet to be determined. I mean, he's tough on crime, and but yeah, I honestly couldn't tell you right now. I think that Peter Dutton lost his conservative edge and was very much swayed by the leftist faction of the Liberal Party. The Peter Dutton from 10 years ago who made Twitter posts about lefties crying and losing their minds. That's the guy that needed to show up.
That's right.
The guy that went
That's-
after the like sort of pride celebrations in the ADF. Like, that was the guy that needed to show up, but he was nowhere to be found. I can't answer your question. I don't know who's more conservative than the other, but they're both meant to be conservative.
Fair enough. And overseas, Robert F. Kennedy seems to be getting some sort of success under the Trump administration in terms of curbing the power of big pharma, bringing some sort of form of accountability, not full accountability, to Pfizer and Moderna, or at the very least forcing them to put labels. I mean, it's better than nothing. Warnings of myocarditis and heart issues, and no longer recommending it to children. What do you make of that? Are these positive developments, or is this just window dressing?
I think they're very positive developments. He's a genuine individual who Trump intelligently appointed to this critically important portfolio. So we need to remember that the big pharma lobby in the United States is the most powerful lobby. Okay, it's not APAC like what a lot of people think. The pharmaceutical lobby is the most powerful and the most profit driven, often at the expense of human suffering. I'm sure we'd both agree on, Leon. So for RFK Jr. to be achieving such results in a very short period of time, given how entrenched by the tune of billions upon billions of dollars big pharma is in the American overall infrastructure, is absolutely outstanding. And I believe that we should get behind this man. We should support him. If you're religious, you should pray for him. And I think the best is yet to come.
Hopefully. I think at one point he approved one of the vaccines, the measles vaccines. What do you think's going on there? I mean, I don't expect you to have an answer, maybe just a guess why he did that. Was it just part of a negotiation tactic?
That's a good question. I'd have to go and review the individual case, but if there is a medication, regardless of what it is, and it has a track record and went through a due process, and it is proven to actually be safe, then I don't see an issue. Where I take an issue for sure is with mandates. So mandates of any vaccine, I'll always be staunchly opposed to. But yeah, if the correct due diligence has been undertaken, then I wouldn't really have much to say about it, as I wouldn't have any other drug, as long as the side effects are put out there and it's not a mandatory thing.
Here in Australia, there seems to be a revolving door between the TGA and Big Pharma, where you've got former members of the TGA suddenly reappearing on the boards of Big Pharma companies. What can we do to stop these conflicts of interest and corruption within our own system?
That is such a good question, Leon. We also see it with our other bureaucracies, our former ministers. One guy that comes to mind was our former trade minister, a guy by the name of Andrew Robb, who sold our Port of Darwin to the Chinese Communist Party, who left his tenure as trade minister and went and worked for that same Chinese state-backed organization on a salary of close to $900,000 a year. A man
Wow.
a man who accumulated all of our trade secrets, sold one of our most, if not our most strategic asset to a hostile, foreign power, then goes and works for them, and apparently that's okay. So to answer your question, the stamping out these conflicts of interest is going to require lawmakers to stand up to bureaucrats. It's unacceptable. These types of conflicts exist, but only with exposure and people getting elected to parliament who actually care about putting an end to these practices can we actually create a pathway forward. Because we need to remember our ministers and most of these members of parliament at federal level, they take their marching orders from the bureaucrats, people who are not elected. They're in there one term to another term. They never leave. So what you're doing is great, speaking out about it, but we need a real appetite to call out the corruption, because these people are serving themselves, acquiring enormous salaries, and they're doing so at the expense of working class families. It's disgusting, and it needs to end.
And creating a national security risk as well on many levels. The lockdowns are well and truly behind us, but do you think Australians have learned anything from the lockdowns, and do you think history could or will repeat itself?
I think history could absolutely repeat itself. Many of us learnt a lot by the sudden loss of freedoms under the stated justification of a national health emergency. And many people who complied, I believe, would not comply twice. But I do believe the majority of people in our society would comply if such an event was to return to our shores. I think that our protest movement would be bigger than before. And, it's hard to say. I credit the freedom movement globally for putting an end to vaccine passports. And so whilst some people out there say, oh, we protested in vain and we didn't achieve anything, I say, well, I don't believe the vaccine passports went on their own. My view is those passports and the mandatory vaccine requirements were intended to become a permanent fixture throughout the world. And it was the pressure from mass protests, from some very brave, members of the European Union and state and federal parliaments around the world getting together, and certain business people. So now I'm at Leon, it's so hard to say. It's so hard to predict, but I'd like to think that we would rise up in a significant way as we did before, but there would also be a lot of people who just comply and roll over and say, yes, government. Oh, you want me to, inject something without a clinical trial into me? Okay, government. You want me to jump up and down 10 times and, do a handstand? Okay, like these people are always going to exist.
Do you think if there's a cultural problem in Australia with people being ready to comply, say, relative to some other societies? You did mention before that we don't have a revolutionary spirit or a history, apart from the Eureka Stockade, which lasted for 15 minutes.
Yes, we have a compliance problem in Australia, Leon. During COVID, I had a news article come across my desk, and it was a story about a local from the American state of Idaho, a man by the name of Eamon Bundy, who is the leader of a civilian militia. The story of the article, Leon, was regarding an elderly woman who was refused discharge from a local hospital because she refused to take a COVID test, right? So the condition of her discharge was she had to take a test. She was an old woman and she said, no, I don't want the test. I don't trust it. So the hospital staff said, well, You're not leaving. You're going to stay. She getting rid of the phone call.
Got you on. I think you're on mute.
Oh, can you hear me now?
That's better. That's better. Much better.
Okay. Sorry, I'll just get back. Yeah. Okay. You can hear me?
Oh, yep. All good. Crystal clear.
Okay, great. So where I was up to with the story, Leon, was it came to the attention of Eamon Bundy, leader of the civilian militia, that this hospital was refusing to let an innocent elderly woman leave and were holding her against her will. So he rounded up about 15 of his men, strapped with semi-automatic rifles, AR-15s and sidearms, and they went down to the hospital and they spoke to the staff and they said, hey, this lady said she doesn't want to take a COVID test. You let her go. And what did the staff do? They backed down. Okay, let her go. And I was so inspired and I was so moved by this story, this sense of community and leaving nobody behind, that I made a post about Eamon on my social media. And I said, Eamon, whoever you are out there, you sir are a legend. And I said, if there's any way the universe or whatever can connect me to Eamon, I want to talk to you. And then the next day I received an inbox message from one of his community members who connected me with him. And I spoke to Eamon on the phone.
Wow.
And so we were speaking 24 hours later. I was speaking to the man, the leader of the militia, somebody that I admire. I admire this man very much. And I promise I'm getting to the point of compliance, but this shows a cultural difference between where he lives in Idaho and the people here in Victoria. And I asked Eamon, I said, so what about the COVID vaccine? And he's like, no, none of us took it. And I said, but okay, but what about, the pressure from the government? What about the lockdowns? What about the police? Did the police try to enforce the COVID restrictions? And he said, you know what, Morgan? They thought about it, but what they also thought about was the fact that we not only have more guns than them, we are better trained than them. So they did not attempt to enforce any restrictions on our freedom because they knew that we were armed and ready to go. And I just sat back and I said, freedom, baby, freedom.
Wow. Super impressive. And Morgan, aside from you got a large following on Facebook, so people can follow you there, on X, on Instagram, where else can people find you?
My handle is the same across all platforms, Morgan C. Jonas. Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, YouTube. I haven't been very active on social media, but I'll start ramping up, gearing up for this election. So that's the best way people can follow me.
Awesome. And Morgan, any final words? I want to give you the floor to say whatever you want and to speak for as long as you want.
Thank you very much. First of all, Leon, I'd like to show you some respect. We had a chat off camera before. I'd just like to reiterate a couple of things I said. Leon, you're a courageous and brave individual and you're speaking out. And everyone at home, I just want you to realize that many of the topics that Leon talks about online, it takes a lot of courage because he does so knowing that there's a risk, but he speaks because it's the right thing to do. And so he's placing the right thing literally above his personal safety in many instances. And Leon, I just want to recognize you for it and commend you for it and thank you for it. So that's the first thing I'd like to say. Second thing to anyone watching is I do see people out there kind of giving up hope, saying, oh, it's all too hard and nothing we do works. Just don't, okay? It's politics, unfortunately, is a bit of a game. And many of us have only been involved for a few years. So learn the game, become smarter. You could get involved in the Freedom Party, freedompartyvic.com.au, and know that the numbers exist for a wonderful transformation of our country. But what's required is to organize those numbers. That's the challenge. And I have a seat at the table for this, and I'm motivated to make this happen. So don't give up. Don't give up just yet. Okay. It's like the fight is continuing. You know, did you ever see a great champion boxer quit just because he was losing a fight? No. They keep going because it's only over when it's over. And so anyone wanting to give up, like, either change your attitude or stay the heck away from me, because I don't need that negativity in my life. And stop spreading your negative crap to other people. That's my message. Thank you.
Good analogy with a boxer, and we can learn from the left one thing. They know the political system inside out. The radical left, the Greens, they know how the system works, and they know how to use that knowledge to the best of their advantage. And that's something that we should learn. And a lot of people that are new to politics, that are on the right or in the centre right or just in the centre, aren't very familiar with our political system, and in some cases, not just ignorant but naive as well. So people out there should take the time to learn about how our system operates. And also, like you said, people need to unite, to get together, people on the right. That's the only way that we can win. So Morgan, thank you so much for coming on today, agreeing to come on at short notice. And I really hope we can have you come back on soon.
I'd love to come back. Thank you very much, Leon.
And thank you for watching, everyone. And God